Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar, Feedback for Project Managers, Managers and HR Managers. This is our 7th webinar in our very first Lunchtime Lightbulb series. We're almost on the home straight and we're so pleased to have you along. As usual, welcome back to those of you who have joined us before and welcome to the newcomers who for this is their first time. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Sabell. And I'll be joined, as usual today, by Michael Meir, CAL Director and Lecturer. Hi, Michael.
Hello, Sarah. Hello, everybody.
Now, before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. This webinar will run for approximately 30 or 40 minutes, depending on your questions. The second half will be opened up to your questions. So if any time you have a question you would like to ask Michael during his presentation, just jot it down in your questions or chat box on your dashboard there, and I'll read them out and have Michael answer them for everybody to hear. This webinar will be available for you to watch over and over again as we've launched our very own CAL YouTube channel, which is very exciting. I'll email you the link to that channel as well as the slides and presentation from today so that you can keep them. Now, for many people, the question, can I give you some feedback, engenders feelings of anxiety and fear. It's like they're hearing a threat or perhaps a promise to hurt and humiliate them. Giving any kind of feedback, and particularly when it's negative or critical in some way, is a tricky task at the best of times, which is why we so often avoid doing it. Handled badly, a few comments that are meant to be helpful can easily become destructive. Michael, I found this the other day from Alice in Wonderland. Let's not ask me why I was reading it. And I think it sums up the whole feedback issue quite nicely. Do you know, I was so angry, Kitty, Alice went on as they were comfortably settled again. When I saw all the mischief you'd been doing, I was very nearly opening the window and putting you out into the snow, and you'd have deserved it. What have you got to say for yourself? Now don't interrupt me, she went on, holding up one finger. I'm going to tell you all your faults.
Sarah. Alice in Wonderland, there's a big misconception about that. Alice in Wonderland is not a children's story, it's a management text. Have a think of the number of Mad Hatters, March Hares, Tweedledees and Tweedledums, Cheshire Cats, Queen Bees you've seen in organisations.
All right, well, there's a bit of fun for a Friday afternoon, but we are, as usual, going to start with a quick poll. So you will, in just a couple of seconds, see on your screen the question in a situation where I have to give negative or constructive feedback. With the answers, tackle it head on. It's no problem. I grit my teeth, close my eyes, cross my fingers, and hope for the best. I ask for someone else to do it for me, or I ignore the whole situation in the hope that it will go away. So we'll just wait a few seconds for people to jot down the answer that best describes them. And at the moment, we've got a dead heat. You know, actually, I'm surprised already. I've got a few people who are just happy to tackle it. Certainly not me. All right, just a couple more seconds so that we can have everybody popping in their answer.
Would you like me to sing and dance?
No need. We've just about got everybody in, so we actually have 9% of people will ask somebody to do it for them, and then we have a dead heat between tackling it head on and gritting my teeth, crossing my fingers, and hoping for the best. Interesting. Good to see that nobody's ignoring the situation, Michael, and hoping it'll go away. So we have a room full of conscientious managers in the room. All right. So in today's webinar, we are going to take a close look at why we find feedback so threatening. We're going to explore the do's and don'ts of giving and receiving feedback and take a look at what's in it for us and why we need to put in the effort to get it right. And of course, as usual, we shall open up the floor to your questions. Let's start off with why we find feedback so threatening. I think the reason we find feedback so threatening is because, well, in a word, it's really very important. I know that I find it difficult. I have stepped out of my team to now manage it, and managing. And boy, do I find it, giving feedback, Michael, I find it really intimidating. What I do try to remind myself is this: feedback in the workplace should be a conversation about development with a business outcome. It is my responsibility to get feedback about myself, and it's up to me as a manager or leader to feedback to those around me, continually giving information to help people improve. It's also important to remember that it has a tangible and real purpose as well as real business benefits. Feedback gives us the opportunity to communicate how we feel about another person's behaviour in which we have an investment, and to receive information about how others feel about our behaviour. Just wanted to double check. Good. For managers at every level, there is really no such thing as a casual conversation. Employees repeat, mull over, dissect and interpret everything that managers say. As a manager, supervisor or team leader, feedback allows us to develop our team members by sharing our views on how they go about accomplishing their tasks. In turn, feedback can assist us to learn how well we lead our team and highlight areas in which we require development. Feedback can be given and received and can be both positive and negative. Positive or constructive feedback reinforces behaviour that has already been displayed and highlights a behaviour that needs to be developed or modified. Positive feedback exists in an environment that encourages communication, is open, supportive and is built on trust. As a team leader, supervisor or manager, it is your responsibility to build and facilitate this environment. Negative or destructive feedback focuses on the individual rather than on the behaviour displayed, and is generally attacking and aggressive, indirect and vague, insensitive and judgmental. This type of feedback encourages defensiveness, is unhelpful in the development of team members and encourages an environment of distrust. This kind of feedback should be avoided. The way in which feedback is given can often determine how effective it is and how well it will be received. So Michael, how about you run us through now a few pointers on giving effective feedback?
Right over, Sarah, that's what today's all about. So look, the first point I'd like to raise here is you must start with managing your attitude. Now this relates to personal respect and to the culture of the organisation, but in general terms, you should always treat people the way that you expect to be treated, and to do it with a can-do expectation. If you expect the best of people, you'll usually get it. Well, conversely, if your attitude is lets people know what you don't expect from them, or that you don't expect much at all, then that's precisely what you'll get. The second point I'd like to make is select the location. I think that's important for all feedback, but it's particularly so when it's got to do with performance, where I'd suggest a less intimidating and more relaxing venue to have the discussion. I guess this really applies to really all work-related communication, but always try and talk somewhere that encourages open communication. For example, talking over problems in a quiet area that is free from noise and interruptions is much, much easier than a busy, noisy location, and you're much more likely to get a positive response or outcome. Likewise, if you want the communication to be informal and flow more easily, then perhaps suggest a walk or a talk in an area where discussions usually occur, such as maybe staff lounges or potentially a lunch area. But remember the old wisdom, praise in public, criticise in private. Now, the next hint, think it through first. Always think before you talk. Engage the brain before you engage the lips. Once something's been said, it can't be erased. You can't take back a thought spoken aloud, and many people find themselves great difficulty trying to explain it. You should think about what you want to say and how to say it. Think about the words and the tone you want to use, and as a good rule of thumb, no matter what the context is, use the KISS principle. Keep it specific and simple. Now, what I mean here is use plain English and keep it simple. You don't need to use big words or overcomplicate the conversation. This probably applies to all business conversations. So look, really, keep it simple. Use empathy. Always try to put yourself in the other person's shoes, to understand what they're hearing rather than what you're saying. That is, try and understand how they feel so that you can see the situation as they see it. This doesn't mean you have to agree with them. It's just that you need to see it from their point of view. Empathy helps you understand the possible effects of your communication that may have on the other person. It also helps you coach, provide feedback, and to manage the difficulty of the conversations. Keep the feedback specific. Specific. Well, Pacific's nice, it's gentle and it's quiet and things like that. Friday afternoon. But we'd like to be, I think, specific about this. Avoid using general and sweeping comments. Describe the behaviour clearly and focus on the specific instance that's under observation. Now this one, be positive. Give at least as much feedback, positive feedback, as you do negative. Positive feedback stimulates the reward centres of the brain, leaving a person open to taking new direction, whereas negative feedback indicates that an adjustment might need to be made and the threat response turns on and defensiveness sets in. You don't need to avoid negative or corrective feedback altogether. Just make sure you follow it through with suggested solutions and outcomes. Match your words and your body language. If you're being honest, your body language will confirm it. If you're feeling angry and denying it, your tone of voice may well and truly give you away. Be honest, but then also check your body language to make sure that your words match your non-verbal signals. Information is the key to problem solving. The more you seek feedback, the more you'll gather information to solve those problems. Do all that you can do to ensure that your feedback is delivered in a timely manner. Feedback is very effective when it's requested. However, in other situations, it should be delivered as soon as possible after the incident. Take into account here your readiness at all times to deliver feedback and whether the team member will be receptive to it. Remember that the adult brain learns best by being engaged. If you wait 3 months to tell somebody that his or her performance is pretty average, then you're making it very difficult for them to grasp the situation and what changes need to be made in order to change direction. It's also far too easy to be ambiguous, and it relies on memory, again, which in my case is proving to be faulty. Productive feedback should be given early and often and frequently. That way, performance reviews are just another collegial, everyday discussion, as opposed to a huge and frightening event. Ensure the feedback is focused on their displayed behaviour, not at the person. It's important to give feedback on behaviours that can be changed and the factors under which the recipient has control. Again, being specific. People generally respond better to specific, positive direction. Avoid saying things like, "You need to be more talkative at meetings." That's just too ambiguous and can be interpreted a lot in personal ways. Try to say something specific and positively pointed to the task that you want accomplished, such as, "You're smart. I'd love to hear at least one opinion from you in each of our meetings." It's important that you're tough, but not mean. When somebody drops the ball at work and you have to give him or her feedback, start by asking his or her perspective of the situation. Resist saying how stupid his or her actions were, even if they were. Make it a compliment sandwich. This simple technique is especially useful when you've got to give negative feedback. Start your comments with what's worked about the person's behaviour or performance. Next, clearly state what didn't work. And finally, end with some positive reinforcement, suggesting steps to remedy the situation, asking people for their own ideas, or simply offering your encouragement. This technique is good for the giver as well as the receiver.
Yes, and that's because this encourages the giver to shift their perspective and glean something positive from the situation before they proceed with their feedback. Correct, Michael?
Miss Sarah, once again you've got it right. So, it's a tried and true method, works best if you balance the negative and the positive. In all cases, be specific and give or ask for examples. While this was a great presentation is a boost to a speaker's confidence, it doesn't necessarily provide tangible insight for their next presentation. A better comment would be, those charts you presented were really great in helping explaining the situation. Or something like, well, you won me when you walked into the room with your positive and assured introduction. You need to own the feedback. Discuss the behaviour in terms that affects you to enable the recipient to understand the full impact of behaviour. This can be done by framing your comments using I statements. For example, I feel aggrieved when you don't arrive at work on time. It's important that we ensure that the feedback we give is actually actionable, that people can do something with it. What am I going to do with this information? Oftentimes, the first step in making feedback actionable is listen to what the other person has to say. Say, for example, you're in a call centre, you're the manager, and you bring up a situation with a staff member about their having maybe 3 customer response delays. In this situation, it might mean the other person gives you some examples on why there were these delays. Maybe there were issues on technology. Perhaps the person was so focused on getting it perfect that they actually waited for an additional day to get the information that they wanted for the customers. Using the opportunity to listen to what the other person is saying often is a way to come up with some action plans that are meaningful. It also gets the other person's buy-in when you take it to that next level. The feedback that you provide has to be meaningful. It has to be something that's important to the job, important to the person, or perhaps to the team. Giving feedback simply by walking through the process of giving feedback oftentimes can take away from its value. Positive feedback also needs to be specific and timely. Just telling a person, well, you did a great job there, Sarah, well, it's not really motivational. You've got to say, why are you doing such a great job? So that the person truly appreciates what it is and sees it as being valid. Finally, watch and ask for feedback. Face-to-face communication is usually the most reliable way to transmit ideas and information because you can give and receive immediate feedback to further clarify something and or to check on that you're on the same wavelength. This direct communication allows for questions that immediately clear up any misunderstandings, as well as help you understand what the other person's trying to say. By watching, you can also check for non-verbal signals or the tone of voice, for agreement or disagreement with the verbal message you're saying. Encourage questions and comments. These can clear up any confusion and help you assess whether your message has been received and understood in the way that you want it to be. Remember that what you say and what they hear can be 2 different things.
Oh, I think that's really great, Michael. And one quick tool that I like to use when I'm checking my communication is to use the 6 C's. I always ask myself, is it clear, complete, concise, concrete, correct, and courteous? So you've given us quite a useful and in-depth summary there, Michael. I might just review it to make sure that we've covered everything off and I've got it right. So when I'm giving feedback, I need to manage my attitude, select the location, think it through first so I don't fly off the handle, use empathy, keep my feedback specific, so what specific incident or behaviour am I giving you feedback on, be positive about it, match my words and my body language, deliver the feedback in a timely manner, which means not putting it off because you're frightened of doing it, focus on the behaviour, and then be specific about, where to next. So what, here's what the feedback is and what can we do about it? What's our plan? Make a compliment sandwich, own the feedback, ensure the feedback is actionable and meaningful, be tough but not mean, and then watch and ask for feedback.
Well, now, Sarah, here's some feedback. Now, let's just have a look at now, let's just check this. First of all, was it clear? Was it complete? Was it concise? Was it concrete, correct, and courteous? Well, Sarah, well done.
Thank you, Michael.
It's important to remember that people have a habit of becoming what you encourage them to be, not what you nag them to be.
Sounds like you might be talking from personal experience there, Michael.
Could be.
I think that's a really good point that you had there at the end, watch and ask for feedback. And it reminds me about the other end of it, so when I'm on the receiving end of feedback, and how important it is to ensure that you are open to receiving feedback. You should also be specific in terms of the type of feedback you're requesting. This could be a specific behaviour or the delivery of a particular leadership skill, for example. I do know also from personal experience that if you're having a bad day and feeling a little bit fragile as a result, then asking for feedback is not going to be a good idea. Wait until you're in a positive frame of mind and open to listening to what others have to say. Michael, can you run us through a few things we can do to make receiving feedback, even if it's negative feedback, a more positive experience and a process that we can engage with and learn from?
Yes, Sarah, there's some very good handy hints here. Look, the first one, listen actively. Allow the person giving the feedback to do so without interruptions or objections. Appreciate that it's not easy to give feedback, particularly if the other person is one of your own team members. The next one, don't take it personally. It's important to remember that the feedback is about behaviour that you've displayed, not about your personality. Feedback gives you the opportunity to modify and develop skills to assist in your growth and the growth of your team members, for you as a person and as a leader. Be aware of your reactions. Feedback's not about who's right or who's wrong, but it's about how your behaviour is being interpreted and observed by others. Remain open to what's being said and avoid any display of defensiveness or anger, even if you don't agree with what the feedback's being given. All right, now ask questions to clarify what's being said and why. Ask for specific examples and instances at the type of behaviour that were at the root of the feedback. And if the atmosphere is tense, you could perhaps introduce a more positive approach by asking for examples of behaviour that the person who's giving you the feedback, what sort of behaviours they'd like to see more of. Sarah, this next one is a really important one. Treat feedback as you would a gift. Sometimes the wrapping paper can be a bit off, but the gift itself is terrific. Assume that the person giving you the feedback wants you to be successful, and that's why they're reaching out to you. You can and should encourage others to regularly share their thoughts about your performance by reacting as if you were receiving a gift. Thank them for their candour. Request clarifying examples and asking probing questions to make sure you understood their comments. Please don't immediately dismiss awkward comments by being defensive. Sometimes people need help to clarify their thoughts. Look, unless they're truly being rude, give them a chance by listening respectively.
I really like that last point there, Michael, this last point about treating feedback as a gift. I mean, it's important to remember that in the end, you have complete control over whether you're going to use their feedback or discard it. And isn't it better to know how others perceive your performance, even if it can sting a little bit at times, than being in the dark? So, Michael, just to recap, once again, when receiving feedback, I need to remember to listen actively, not to take it personally, beware of my reactions, ask questions to clarify what's being said and why, and treat it like a gift. So we've gone through, how and how to give it, how to receive it effectively, but why do we need to put in the effort and, make all of this effort into getting it right, into giving and receiving feedback well, Michael?
Oh, Sarah, everybody needs feedback. And one of the myths about feedback that it exists only to give it to poor performers. No. That's absolutely not true. Feedback needs to be given on a continuous basis, both informal and formal. By being honest and helpful to ourselves and others, we improve what we do, we become more credible, we demonstrate our own uniqueness and our humanity. We can expand our business opportunities. We don't have to worry about being caught out lying. We create a healthy and trustful network. We find people who want to work with us. It generates loyalty, can generate sales and learning, and we can make genuine friends. Look, people don't have to like you, but they will need to respect you. Remember that every member of your staff is a valuable company asset that needs to be cared about and cared for, and given ongoing encouragement to perform at or above their performance guidelines. They also need recognition and reward so that they have the motivation to continue to produce their best. What gets recognised, rewarded, reinforced, gets repeated. In some cases, this is easy, as look, some jobs and responsibilities have an immediate built-in feedback process. In these jobs, the knowledge of results comes from the activity itself. Well, for example, an electrician repairs a broken switch and it begins to work. Well, there's a light bulb moment. Say a development officer in charge of a fundraising campaign can see the results when the money starts to roll in. Or say just perhaps when a course coach successfully helps a student through a successful coaching call. Look, once the job is complete, there's an obvious result and an immediate outcome and reward. And we can say thank you or express gratitude in some other way, and this might be in the form of a reward or a celebration. Look, people absolutely enjoy having their tyres pumped up in front of other people. This kind of feedback is very effective because it's immediate. However, even jobs with immediate feedback can also benefit from external feedback, as it contributes to an employee's overall knowledge of his or her results. Sometimes that external can be a bit of feedback from a customer.
That's great. I think we often forget that positive feedback, there's the slide I was missing, Michael. Never mind. I think that we forget positive feedback motivates people and gives them a sense of self-worth, and supervisors and managers should do it frequently, and especially whenever the employer's performance meets or exceeds expectations. We should look for something good to tell our employees, and we shouldn't always focus on areas that need improvement. In fact, dwelling on weaknesses and giving too much negative feedback can actually hinder performance. Michael, I recall your fair bet system, and that can help you remember how to give positive feedback. How does that work? Run us through it.
Well, it's not like betting on the horses, Sarah. Sarah, the fair bet system is a very simple tool to help you remember all the elements required when giving positive feedback. First of all, the B, the behaviour. Tell people what aspects of their behaviour you found valuable. The E is for the effect. What positive effect does that have on performance? And why is that performance important? The T, thank you. Saying thank you is a simple but very powerful courtesy. You can gauge that power when it doesn't happen. Now, hopefully, managers will provide informal feedback almost every day. However, by being more consciously observing and providing detailed feedback, managers can provide a critical role in the employee's continued success and motivation to meet performance expectations. Effective observation and feedback can strengthen communication between the manager and the employee, help the employee attain performance objectives and meet required standards, increase their motivation and commitment, maintain or increase self-esteem, and provide support. Researchers have commented that if someone shows faith in your abilities, then you'll achieve your goals. But that if people are negative about you, then your ability to achieve will suffer. I guess this is because we all respond well to positive feedback, but negative feedback certainly affects our performance.
It's a good point to finish up on there, Michael, before we open up the floor to questions. Remembering or thinking through how we can use feedback wisely. Feedback and the thought of giving or receiving it is often thought of negatively, with most people assuming the experience will be a negative and uncomfortable one. But if we think of feedback as a gift, then we can look on it quite differently. After all, if you're giving feedback, then your main motivation is to usually see someone change their behaviour for the better. And what I've gathered from today, Michael, is that feedback is rarely given with ill intent. And so it can help people understand how they're perceived and how they may make positive changes to influence those perceptions. Thank you for everything you've run us through today, Michael. And you've taken us through all the great stuff on why we find it threatening, the do's and don'ts of giving and receiving feedback, and why we need to put the effort into getting it right. We will open up the floor to your questions now. We've had some great questions coming in as we've been working. And the first question I have here is, I recently experienced some feedback in my performance appraisal that I felt was unreasonable and misrepresented my motivations. What's the best way of dealing with such a situation?
Sarah, again, if I can, I'd suggest if you receive that, the tip there is to have a beer conversation. Beer conversation, the behaviour, what you experienced from it, what you expected from it, and then the response, allowing a person to respond so that they had an opportunity to discuss the fact that were they trying to belt you or to encourage you.
Okay, excellent. The next question I have here is, I find it difficult to speak to my manager and it's hard to make her see me in a better light. What can I do?
Sometimes in these, if the difficulties arising from assertiveness skills, well, those are skills that can be acquired. The other part might be that it's just presenting it in such a way as to open it up to enable the manager to give you that encouragement. So what I would recommend there is prepare and practice scenarios so that you've done a lot of preparation, you practice scenarios so that you can lead the manager through the conversation.
Okay, excellent. Another one here is, one of my team members isn't pulling his weight and this is beginning to cause bad feeling among everyone else. What's the most effective way of dealing with this?
First one is to find out whether perhaps it's availability, availability, or maybe attitude. Availability, maybe that's affecting, there could be other things that affecting a person, home life, etc., etc. Ability, the question is, can they do the job? Now, if it's straight attitude, then the best way to deal with that is address it directly as it is. And again, it comes back to that beer conversation. What you're experiencing as a result of the behaviour, the attitude, the expectation, coming up with what are we going to do in the response, and having that conversation where it has to have results. It's not just about giving a person the feedback, but it's also taking, well, what are we going to do about it?
Okay, I'm conscious of time, but I have a few more questions I'd like to quickly ask. One is, are using the aids of whiteboards, etc., a good way of getting feedback in the workplace where people can give feedback anonymously?
Yes, but I'd also want to know a little bit about, it's a bit of a culture part there, is why the need for anonymous feedback. That tends to tell me that perhaps people don't have faith that their managers won't punish them for giving the feedback. Now, if that's the cause, then literally there's a bit of a culture problem there that needs to be addressed first.
Okay, and can using a tool such as a 360-degree assist staff giving feedback to their managers, and when could they be appropriately used?
360-degree feedback systems are great systems in cultures whereby you can tell the truth without fear of being punished. Now, it takes a bit of a while to get those arrangements right, because oft-times if you've got Theory X type managers, they'll tend to want to shoot the messenger rather than to listen to the message. But 360 degrees can be very good, but they take a while to get them in place. When could they become appropriate? Once the culture's there that you can have those honest conversations between each other. One of the things that I would perhaps as a hint here, to start having go, stop, start conversations. They're less confronting. Go on doing this, stop doing that, start doing this. Does that help?
Yeah, and actually there's another one just came through saying, I've just received some 360-degree feedback which concerns me. How can I learn more about why I'm getting certain feedback if I can't confront the respondents?
There's two things that I'd suggest here. The first part is to do an audit. Is part of this justified? And I'd be saying, well, how have I contributed to the situation? The second part would be, what's the intent of the negative feedback that you're getting? Is there something else that's going on in the workplace that's not work-related? Is it a personality clash? And therefore, how would you manage that?
Okay, and I am very conscious of time, but I've got one more here. I've recently been given a managerial position which involves conducting performance reviews, and I know that one in particular will be challenging. How do I give feedback in this setting?
Look, tell the truth. But the way you tell the truth is fairly important. Don't sugarcoat it. Treat people as adults, and particularly to get the person to reflect on their own behaviour. That question of what's holding you back, what do you think that you're doing that's not helping you perform, getting the person to reflect and reflect. You've got to get the person to own the problem rather than you, and then work on a joint solution.
Excellent, and I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much for joining us. If you do have any, if you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear it. If you have any further questions for Michael or for myself, please do let us know. Also, we'd love to hear your suggestions for any topics, ideas, or things you'd like us to discuss in webinars. You can see our contact details are up on the screen. You can visit our website, send us through an email, call us on the phone, like us on Facebook, and as mentioned earlier, you can now watch us on YouTube, which is very exciting. Thanks for today, Michael, and thanks for everyone who joined us. I hope you've enjoyed the 7th of our 10 Lunchtime Light Bulb Series webinar, and that you now have a better understanding of the importance of getting feedback right.
Thanks, sir, but look, let's practice. How did you think today went?
I'll tell you about that later, Michael. Thanks, everybody, and I hope you have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you next time.